Summer's here, and Nordstrom has everything you need for your best dress season ever. From beach days and weddings to weekend getaways and your everyday wardrobe. Discover stylish options under $100 from tons of your favorite brands like Mango, Skims, Princess Polly, and Madewell. It's easy, too, with free shipping and free returns, in-store order pickup, and more. Shop today in stores, online at Nordstrom.com, or download the Nordstrom app.
Get into your body's vitals with the Vitals app on Apple Watch.
I wanna get into my body and let my skin do the talking. I wanna feel like I'm myself again.
The Vitals app tracks key overnight metrics so you can spot changes in your health before you feel them. The Vitals app on Apple Watch. iPhone XS or later required. The Vitals app is for wellness purposes only and not for medical use.
I wanna get into my body.
Hey, I'm Candice Lim.
And I'm Kate Lindsay. And you're listening to ICYMI.
In case you missed it.
Slate's podcast about internet culture.
And today it is not just the two of us. We are joined by longtime friend of the pod and fellow Slatester, Nadira Goffe. Hello, Nadira.
Hi, it's been so long.
I know you were kind of like the valiant person holding it over during the interim, but now we're finally all together as we should be.
You know, I do what I can. One big happy family.
Yeah. And we'll get to why specifically you are gracing us with your presence on today's episode in a few. But first, I do think it is high time I talk about the event of the summer, the concert I have been teasing basically since I joined this show. The Trisha Paytas, The Eras of Trish tour. Now, Nadira, when I mentioned this briefly earlier, you looked at me like I possibly had two heads. Have you heard about this? What is your familiarity with Trisha Paytas?
I mean, I'm as familiar with Trisha as I am, or as any culture reporter should be. Right. But I'm not. That's such a black hole of information in terms of internet culture for me.
Yes.
So it's like I'm abreast of it because it's my job and I'm vaguely interested, but I'm also like everything I know about her, I know against my will.
Yeah.
And so
yeah. And to the title of her show, she has had many eras. She's like truly a testament. They played at the beginning of this concert a montage of basically all of her time on YouTube. And I was like, that is a pioneer. Like that is someone who has been there from the beginning and has lived so many lives. And she is she does mukbang content, vlogging, ASMR, OnlyFans. Like she's truly tried everything. But something that casual people might not know about her is that she loves to sing.
No, this I actually do know.
Yeah,
partially because I'm a theater kid.
Okay, perfect.
But it's one of the only things I do know about her.
Right. Okay, perfect. Because she's been making her own music as well as elaborately covering other songs for years. The most iconic, in my opinion, being Bet on It.
Yes.
When she
I've seen with the wig and the
beat for beat in costume reenacted Troy Bolton's performance in High School Musical 2. I think we gotta hear it.
Here we go.
Everybody's always talking at me. Everybody's trying to get in my head. I want to listen to my own heart talking. Need to count on myself
It's just
instead.
like her tits are so
Lose yourself to get what
This shirt is so tight.
Get on a ride and wanna get off.
So imagine that's playing. The music video is playing. And so, she's I believe the exact location where it filmed too. She fully did it. And so that's playing behind her. She's in front of it and reenacting the dance moves and singing over top of that. Crucially, 8 months pregnant.
She's pregnant?
She is 8 months pregnant.
Wow.
And she is up on that stage, like her due date imminent. Like it's this month.
That's a different kind of High School Musical.
Yeah.
I know. And the thing is, she's 8 months pregnant, obviously, with the Pope.
Yes. Are you familiar with this?
I am also familiar.
So presumably She is pregnant with the reincarnation of the late Pope Francis because the birth of her children always seemed to coincide with the death of a really high-profile figure. And so I got my friends tickets for us to see the Heirs of Trish in Atlantic City. It is only while researching for this episode that I realized it came to New York and I just missed it. So I went to Atlantic City for no reason. But it was fun because like I said, like she's singing and dancing to that song to a whole sold out venue. It was in a casino. It was also her second to last show. It was genuinely like an amazing show.
For those who don't know, Atlantic City is like the East Coast small, sad cousin of Vegas.
Yes.
And I say that with love because I'm obviously from Philadelphia. So it's very, you end up in Atlantic City at some point in your life if you're from this area. But it is, when we say casino, like imagine imagine the Vegas fanfare, but on a much smaller Jersey-like scale.
Yeah. And I had to take a bus there, bus back. But it is like the Venn diagram of New York and Philly because that's where everyone who was at the show was basically from. But I made the mistake that I feel like a lot of like New Yorkers do, which is assuming that anything in New Jersey must be close. This is not that close at all, and I learned the hard way.
Yeah. Okay. So like, here's my thing. I didn't realize it was a concert. So because I've seen Caleb Heron live, and he did like a little bit of stand up, a little bit of podcast, a little bit of blah 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 blah. But we're saying she had a set list, song to song to song.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
So she just performed either covers that she has done in the past, or her original songs that she also has.
Of course.
And then at the end, which is when my friend and I did in fact leave because we were like, we want to make sure we get on the last bus. She started just taking requests from the audience and just singing a cappella, like whatever song they suggested. It was, I mean, the thing is, like, I am not necessarily a huge, like, big event person. Like, I always someone always just pisses me off. It's like really like honestly why. But when I say that there was like not a kinder, sweeter, funnier audience for a show, because it was, you saw everyone was like friends immediately because you're already there for this very niche reason. Everyone is like in the bathroom doing like the quintessential girls in the public women's restroom immediately best friends thing. And I think it's because like no one is at the Trisha Paytas The Eras of Trish show for clout. Like the way that like the actual Eras tour, there was like people reporting like, mean girl behavior or like singing really loudly. This was just a bunch of like mostly women and gay men with the same very niche online fave. And then Trisha herself, she comes out. It's a sold out room. Everyone's screaming. She actually tears up because it's second to last show. She even knew people in the front row by like name because I guess there are fans who just have followed her from the beginning of time to now. And so that was all fun, but I will say just as important, the venue, it's at a place called Ocean Casino. They served a genuinely great, dry, crisp glass of Prosecco, huge pour, $14. It was like, I remember taking a sip and being genuinely like, oh my God, like this was you don't expect to get a good glass of wine at a venue, let alone a Atlantic City casino, Trisha Paytas The Eras of Trish show. But it was great. Everything about it was great.
You know, Kate, I am glad that you're coming back with good news because, like, you've been looking forward to this for a while and so, like, achieved. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Also, Nadira, didn't you also go to, like, a concert recently?
I did. I did. I saw our queen mother, Beyonce,
There you go.
at the Cowboy Carter tour when she went to the MetLife Stadium.
New Jersey again.
East Rutherford, New Jersey, but also very New York coded because it's the biggest venue that you can have in terms of having a quote unquote New York venue. So all of the merch said New York, even though she very much was in Jersey. And she was incredible. She flew over the audience like 3 times.
Nice.
She makes miracles happen.
And wasn't there, did you say there was like a montage of her older songs or a medley?
Yeah, she did throw it back to her older work with a short medley, which funnily enough, she extended for the European dates, which she's on now. And so there was a lot of, I don't know, I guess just hubbub on TikTok and the social media because people were upset that she gave, London more songs or more of her past than she gave us. And a lot of people were retweeting all these different posts that to the effect said, does Beyonce know that she's from America? Because why is she giving like London and the UK and all of these European dates all of this extra stuff? But she taketh, she giveth away, and we can't question it.
Yeah, and well, rest assured, fellow Trisha Paytas fans, I believe everyone got the same amount of bet on it. Yeah. So do not worry about that. But Nadira, you have been booked and busy in general recently because in addition to seeing Beyonce, you also attended another highly sought-after event that is similarly all over my TikTok, the Diddy trial.
Mm-hmm. Sean Combs, a.k.a. Diddy, was charged with numerous federal crimes, including racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking. The case has been in court since the 12th of May, with both legacy media and independent creators sharing the press pool.
Nadira is going to tell us all about being in that courtroom, but first, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about how the coverage of this trial differs from past court cases and why legacy media and independent creators are going head-to-head. Hey, listeners. Before we get back to our excellent combo with Nadira, we've got some exciting news to share. Candice, would you like to do the honors?
Absolutely. Okay, drum roll, please. We have some beautiful new cover art for the podcast. I would say it's very internet past mixed with internet present.
Yeah, it's like brat summer green, but like Y2K vibes, then like little sprinkle of emoji. Mm-hmm. It does bring me back to the days when I learned HTML code for MySpace.
Exactly. And so, listeners, we are so excited to enter this new visual era for ICYMI, and we want to make sure you know about it so when you're scrolling on your podcast app, you know that it's us.
And of course, if you're not already doing so, make sure you're following ICYMI so you never miss an episode and see our hot new look. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help find you options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And we're back. And Nadira, we're so glad to have you here for kind of an interesting angle on this pretty harrowing case that's going on right now. It's something you've been writing about for Slate in the past few weeks. You've been covering it's United States versus Sean Combs, also known as the Diddy trial. So would you be able to give us just a bit of an overview of what this case is about?
Sure. So Sean Combs is currently on trial in a federal case for a number of charges having to do with sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution, and the biggest one being the racketeering charges, the RICO charges, which is a notoriously hard charge to sort of mount against someone and are really complex because they have multiple layers to them. There's multiple things that you would have to prove in order to successfully mount a RICO case. And so a lot of the questions about the Diddy trial are not necessarily related to the trafficking or the other charges, but more so related to whether or not the racketeering charges will stick.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's kind of complex.
Yeah, and it's already a prominent case, like starting with when the accusations came out up until now the trial's playing out. But Then you kind of add in all the famous faces that are appearing on trial. So there's Cassie Ventura, Kid Cudi, Kanye West. They've either been mentioned or brought into the courtroom. And so the storm around this just keeps getting bigger.
Mm-hmm. And you, Nadira, you've been inside that very courtroom as a reporter in the press line. But you wrote a recent piece about how that press line is looking very different because there's this crop of YouTubers, podcasters, TikTok creators who are also getting into the courtroom and maybe beating legacy media at their coverage game. So, like, let's just talk about, first off, how hard it is to get into that room. Like, what has your experience been like so far?
Sure. In a word, it's incredibly difficult. Well, I guess that would be many words. I can't say how it necessarily works for other trials. I do have a question about whether or not my experience or the sort of protocols for this are for all federal trials versus state, or if it's this case in particular because it's high profile or something else. But there are only a certain number of spots for everyone in the actual courtroom. As of right now, there's about 21 spots for media personnel and about 14 spots for regular civilians, right? Because it is our civilian right to be able to attend these cases and know what's happening in them. So regular civilians who aren't press are allowed in, but there's only a limited number of spots. Everyone else gets put into an overflow room, sometimes multiple overflow rooms if there's a lot of other people. And in the overflow rooms, you're basically watching what's like a TV broadcast of what's happening in the courtroom. In order to be one of those first 21 members of the press or 14 members of the public, you have to wait in line. And of course, as any line in New York goes, the waiting in line part gets to be very intense, very competitive. And what a lot of people do if they can afford it, whether these are, you know, your big, well-known legacy media publications like ABC or New York Times or whoever, or whether it be influencers who have money, what a lot of them do is they pay for line holders to save their spots in line. And on the biggest, most high-profile days of the trial, for example, if rumor gets around that Kid Cudi is testifying tomorrow, right? Those lines start to form as early as the previous day.
Yeah.
So if you're waiting for a Tuesday testimony, if you're trying to get into the court on a Tuesday morning, then a lot of times the line will start at 3 p.m., 4 p.m. on that Monday previous.
Oh, my God.
So it's a lot of money that people are spending in order to secure their spot in line, and everyone else just has to get there early. When I did make it into the room for Kid Cudi's testimony, I got there at 5:45 in the morning, and I was number 19 of 21.
Wow.
So if I had gotten there at 6, because it started to fill pretty quickly, I wouldn't have made it in. And so these are the sort of extensive hours and how hard it is to make it in. And if you throw in the fact that some new media have press credentials and some don't, then you also get into who deserves to be in which line and all of this stuff.
Yeah, and you know, like the second we bring up YouTubers in a courtroom, I think the other trial that comes to mind is Depp v. Heard, which was the defamation case between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. It was this watershed moment for internet culture where people were landing on sides and kind of behaving so vehemently towards each other that it was just extremely divisive, not just, I imagine, out in the courtroom, but like on TikTok. Have you seen any differences between the way the Diddy trial and the Depp v. Heard trial is being discussed online?
Yeah. There's one big difference, which is that it's not nearly as polarizing as I thought it would be. So every day that I've been into the courtroom/house, you know, whether it's the building or the room itself, you see the same members of new media, the same YouTubers, the same streamers, the ones who are really serious about it, who have moved from LA or Miami and are staying here temporarily and come every day to cover the trial, right? And I spent a lot of time watching their specific content. So not necessarily the content of people who haven't been there and are just talking, but the people that I know have been there.
Yeah.
And upon watching their content, I expected it to be a lot more he said, she said, I don't believe her, I don't believe him, and a lot more stringent in picking a side. But I was actually surprised to hear or to see that a lot of the members of the new media sort of core that we have growing are, I don't know, a lot more fastidious about the details and are a lot more interested in the actual legal analysis part of it. They are somewhat concerned with if they believe or don't believe specific testimony, but they're mostly concerned with whether or not the prosecution is doing a good job in mounting their case or whether or not the defense is doing a good job during their cross-examination, which is not a level of discernment that I necessarily expected given everything that happened with Depp v. Heard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that could be because like a big difference between the two trials is that Depp v. Heard was live streamed essentially, and that we do not have that like 24/7 real-time access into this trial. And so, you know, when it was being live streamed, perhaps they didn't feel as much of a responsibility to articulate in terms of the actual legal content what was happening there, because you could just watch it. And so they felt like maybe they had to add some color in terms of like he said, she said. But with this, it feels like in the absence of people being able to sort of directly watch from their homes, they're like bringing the next best thing, which is just like coming back out and regurgitating everything they just saw.
Yeah, I think it's definitely that for sure. I think that plays a huge role in it. I also think that we're dealing with two different scenarios in terms of what we know about the people involved. In Depp v. Heard, it was very much he said, she said, and the he said part being a very beloved actor. But in this case, we have a defendant who is well known and partially well known for settling Cassie's bombshell suit in one day, which doesn't look great, and then for the leaked CNN video of him assaulting her in a sort of hotel lobby. And so there isn't necessarily the same question about whether or not he's a good guy purely, right? People have already seen him do a bad thing. And so the question then becomes, did he do the bad things that the government said he did? Or more specifically, did he do them in the sort of legally criminal way that the government is alleging he did?
Yeah. And I think that's something really interesting about the way that like this like crop of new media YouTubers and podcasters are like covering. They're really getting into the like legal weeds of this. And so I kind of want to name names and like let's talk about these YouTubers and podcasters and creators that are getting access into this courtroom and like possibly making careers off this trial. Who are they? And like what do they have that, let's say, a legal analyst going on CNN doesn't?
Yeah, so for sure the biggest one is Stephanie Sue of the Rotten Mango pod / YouTube channel. She's massively popular. I believe that her YouTube channel has over 5 million subscribers and just recently like knocked Joe Rogan's podcast off the sort of most popular podcast on YouTube seat. I don't know how they measure those metrics, but apparently she now has that title. And so she's a massive deal. She started off doing mukbang videos and has since pivoted to doing true crime videos. And her content is pretty good. It's pretty meticulous. She actually takes the court transcripts and she reads them and she shows excerpts of them on the screen as she's, you know, talking about specific testimony or quotes. So you know when she's quoting something that a witness has actually said versus when she's just giving her take on something, right? And she does a really good job at explaining specific legalese, like this is the legal reason why Cassie's husband isn't allowed in the courtroom during specific testimony or something like that. However, she also takes liberties with her reenactments. When she's reading Cassie's testimony or quotes from it, she puts on a different vocal affect than Cassie did, right? And so you have this sort of question about tone and you have this question about vibe, I guess, for lack of a better word, and the sort of setting the scene of how things were. And then you have the live streamers. A large number of new media don't necessarily take the time that Stephanie Sue might take because she doesn't release every day. She goes home, she makes her very involved, very long YouTube video podcasts, releases them, chops them up on TikTok or whatever, and that's it. But you also have the contingent that every day after court proceedings, they live stream, whether it be on YouTube or Twitch or whatever platform. One that I really like is Tisa Tells, partially because she's very sweet in person, but also because I find her content to be so different than other content that I would be allowed to make as a legacy media journalist.
I have just ran out of the courtroom. Okay, you guys, Diddy's team seems like they're in serious trouble. It looks like these games they may be allegedly playing have finally caught up with them. Judge Aaron was pissed.
Her live streams feel like you're on FaceTime with your friend or your mom. They're very chaotic. It's very rushed sentences, stuttering, like almost as if she just has to get all of the information out as quickly as possible before she forgets it, right? She also will go into the middle of some action or something like that. And so you have that contingent. And then you have the people who are sort of in between. A lot of people were very interested to see that Myron Gaines of Fresh and Fit was attending this trial for the first bit. He is a very well-known manosphere creator. For example, he famously wrote a book called Why Women Deserve Less. And his content is really focused on devaluing women or telling women to devalue themselves while telling men to value themselves more. And so, yeah, watching his content is a little bit different than watching, Stephanie Sue's content.
Right.
Oh my God, I need to find that on Goodreads. See what people are
hey,
saying.
it had such a high rating on Amazon.
Serious?
It was like thousands of reviews, I believe, and it was definitely over a 4.5.
Oh my God.
You would have to fact check me on that, but I'm almost positive.
Oh my God. I mean, something also that was interesting hearing about these creators is obviously, they're new media, they're also independent. But someone like Stephanie actually has like a team with her. Like they've built their own little institutions almost. So like for someone like her, where she does have more than one of her own staff member helping her with this, what does her setup and reporting process look like for this?
From what I could tell, it's pretty extensive. And obviously I'm not seeing all of it. But yeah, she travels with a team. For the first week or so, I want to say, had 2 assistants with her. So that's also saving 3 seats on the press side of getting into the courtroom, which she does every day, as opposed to just one for her. So that was a little bit of a thorn in certain people's sides. But since she has only had 1 assistant with her, and then she goes home and she has a whole setup. She must have a sort of video setup. She turns her content that she records into multiple different forms, whether it's an audio podcast, YouTube podcast, and edited, TikTok clips. She also has the sort of masked male voice that she talks to, that she bounces her explanation of court proceedings off of, who's widely believed to be her husband, whose identity she keeps secret. So it's like, is he here? Is he back wherever they're based? And then you just think about how much money that costs of having a whole team that has to stay in hotels, that has to eat, in addition to the $1,000 per day that she's spending on line holders, which is per her, which she said in one of her videos, which is a lot of money. And so, yeah, extensive. People are shelling out a lot of money for this, but a lot of creators have said that, not specifically Stephanie Sue herself, she has not, revealed anything about her finances, but a lot of creators have said to me in person that, their audiences are paying for them. They like the content that they're being given. Yeah,
I was going to say, do you have, when you think about paying $1,000 per day for line holding, and that's just like one of many other expenses, that's something that potentially even a traditional media outlet wouldn't choose to spend money on for whatever reason. But it sounds like creators are being funded in such a way where they're like making that back. And I'm curious if you have any concept of how they are funding it. Like, what is the secret, and can we pass it along to traditional media, and maybe that'll fix everything?
For creators as big as Stephanie Sue, everything is super veiled, right? You don't necessarily know where the funds are coming from. You assume that there's brand deals. Maybe she has a Patreon. I don't necessarily know. But for the mid-sized creators, it's very apparent. They have their Cash App on a ticker tape across their videos on their live stream. And a lot of them are making back at least half, if not more, of what they're spending trying to cover the trial from people who are paying them or gifting them money because they like their content. They like their analysis or their reporting on it. And so it is a very sort of symbiotic relationship, but it is also very wild to see as someone who, clocks in and clocks out at an actual magazine where we have like HR and funds and expenses and like, you know.
Everyone just wants to go around right now and just say their Venmo handle just for fun.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's working. Because another reason why YouTubers like Stephanie Sue are getting millions of views on their Diddy recap videos is because for their audience, it's a form of entertainment. And this idea of like trials becoming salacious within culture, that's not new. There are so many journalists who have made their careers on landmark cases. I'm thinking of like Megan Cuniff with the Tory Lanez trial.
Yeah, so is this entertainment, or are we just seeing a crop of new media journalists rise to the occasion? Maybe we should talk about it, but after a break. When we come back, how true crime culture led YouTubers to nail trial coverage and why they're beating legacy media at their own game.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. The Air Force Research Laboratory is partnering with Google Cloud using AI to accelerate defense research for air, space, and cyberspace forces. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
Have you ever spotted McDonald's hot, crispy fries right as they're being scooped into the carton? And time just stands still. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Oh, ICYMI listeners, do I have a scoop for you? So what is it, you ask? It's that Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Now, before anyone goes suggesting that this is just a rumor, know that there's actual proof that this kettle of tea is not only piping hot, but 100% true. So, yeah, sometimes it pays to be a little nosy, but it always pays to discover. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
And we're back. So Nadira, like we've said, you have been in the courtroom for the Diddy trial. You were there on behalf of Slate, which is technically considered traditional media, but you presumably were surrounded by independent creators who have been covering the trial on their YouTube channels and TikTok accounts. What are some differences you've noticed?
One of the biggest differences is the way that they're able to relay their accounts of what happened during court proceedings, right? And I think that this probably gets at the heart of what can new media give that legacy media can't, because we're sanctioned by journalistic conduct, right? And a large part of that comes down to color, comes down to this idea of impartiality. I don't think that traditional journalism is impartial or unbiased, but I think that there are ways in which it tries to get around it, or at least keep up that facade or get close to it. Whereas new media can kind of say whatever they want. You know, for example, if there is a witness whose testimony that I personally felt was odd or weird, I can't necessarily say it in so many terms, but a live streamer could just say, yeah, that guy was weird. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so I think that they're providing this service of what happened, but also how they feel about what happened in some form of sort of entertainment that traditional journalism can't provide. For example, Armand Wiggins, who's probably one of my favorite creators to watch report on this trial, does a really good job of explaining who said what and what it means. But whenever there's an opportunity to reenact a scene, like a harmless scene of testimony, to try and set the scene or paint the picture, he does that. For example, during Kid Cudi's testimony, he had this really funny moment that made everyone in the courtroom laugh, which is when he said he went to this meeting with Diddy, and Diddy, when he got there, Diddy was staring out the window with his arms behind his back like a Marvel supervillain, right? Kid Cudi was setting the scene in his testimony. Armand Wiggins then acted that out on his live stream. And it was funny. I have to say it was funny. And those are the sort of antics that I would go to if I was an audience member. He's very careful, obviously, not to act out the more serious, horrible aspects of testimony. But all of the funny tidbits like that, he turns into a whole sort of like charade. And in a way that is just, it's very enticing. I can see the appeal.
Yeah. And I also actually want to go back to Stephanie Sue for a moment, because in sort of recent days, her own followers have kind of become worried about her safety because she claims Diddy himself potentially singled her out in the crowd.
On Thursday, we even write the time down. At 8:50 a.m., jurors are not in the courtroom. Sean Combs sits down at his chair, and he turns in his chair to the right. This is our eye direction, like we can see him now. He starts staring in what felt like in our general direction, or perhaps right behind us, and it's a pretty lengthy stare. And then he starts nodding while mouthing the words dramatically, "I know you." He mouths it twice with what we perceive to be a smirk. Then as he's turning back around to face the front, he's like ever so slightly shaking his head while he's still smirking. But again, I'm not trying to be dramatic. I don't know if he was looking at me. He could have been looking behind me, right? But then right at that moment, the jury comes in, we all stand up, and as there's noise in the courtroom, because we're not allowed to talk when the judge is on the bench, a reporter from a major media network, I mean, she's been doing this for years and years. She's like a professional. She turns to me and she whispers, quote, "You're putting that in your video, right? Because that was at least 7 seconds."
So what, Nadira, is your reaction? Because then there's, there's the story of the trial, and then there's like the meta story of being there. What is your take on that?
So I will say that this is a perfect example of exactly what I mean. You see how Stephanie Sue is incredibly careful to not just say, "He was looking at me." Right? She gives herself a wide berth. He could have been looking behind us. He was looking in our general direction. But you also see how you don't hear that tidbit from any other major news publication, and especially not whichever member of the press allegedly told her to include it in her video, right? Because even though she does a good job of trying to be impartial or to hedge her bets, there are certain things she can say that we just can't necessarily say. And so I think that that's a great example of where the sort of new media coverage sits in what it's allowed to relay to its audience. I will also say that you do sort of get the sense that because new media is making entertainment, and because their position is very much centered around themselves witnessing the trial instead of just this omniscient perspective on something that's happening, you get this sense of, okay, at what point does this become a sort of melodrama of you attending this trial, right? Stephanie Sue was chewed out online when, I believe during the first week of jury selection, for making a TikTok where she was like twirling in front of the courthouse and eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And everyone was like, "You're not taking this seriously." But who says she ever has to or had to take it seriously? And there's this idea that they're not just reporting on the trial in terms of, this is what happened, this person said this, but I was there, and isn't that crazy? And I think that adding that layer also, I don't know, underlines a sort of questionable undertone behind all of this reporting, because the moment you sort of see yourself as a character within it is the moment where things can maybe get even more distorted than they were previously, which is not to say that she was telling the truth or not telling the truth, but it's just to say that we don't know. And that the idea that when you start to think of yourself as a sort of central character in this narrative, it's more likely that I don't know, that line gets blurred.
Yeah, and for your viewers too, because if you look at the comments of the TikTok we just listened to, it's people being like, "I'm worried for you. Like, you need to be safe, all this stuff." And it's like, okay, we are that is not, the focus is getting pulled now, like from what this trial is about to now this like kind of side story. And that it's like the danger of making yourself a character is like, well, you're actually there to cover the Diddy trial.
Yeah, and I will say, to her credit, the first 20 or so minutes of that video are also about the culture that's growing outside of the courthouse, which is a story in of itself, one we don't have time to get into, but definitely has its own security concerns. I've been concerned for my own safety just waiting in that line, to tell you the complete truth. But it is a sort of extra thing. And so then you also have all of the new media who aren't going into the trial, but spend a lot of their time just making TikTok videos right outside of it about things that are happening inside or about the people in line. It's, I'm 100% positive because I have been filmed waiting in line as a member of legacy media that I'm in the back of probably a number of people's TikToks just covering like, oh my God, isn't this line long outside? And so you have the story of what's going on inside and then this sort of new story of what's going on outside because social media is powering that. It's a very weird dynamic.
Yeah. And to even get more meta on meta, like as much as we're seeing creators try to compete with traditional journalists, we're also seeing traditional journalists like do things to try to compete with those creators. It just feels like another era of like the pivot to video thing because we have outlets like Rolling Stone, for example. They're putting their reporters covering the Diddy trial in front of the camera, but like there's a stiffness to it. There's a stiffness that like doesn't work or is not as appealing or getting as many numbers as like Stephanie.
Well, yeah, it's hard because, I think right now we're in a weird era of journalism where for the most part, if you joined, it was not with the intention of making videos, guys. Like, if you joined digital media, it's because you wanted to blog. And Nadira, you and I are both willing victims of this pivot to TikTok, this video era, because we will appear on it. And I've, done my best to adapt with the times. But I've also seen from legacy media in particular on their TikTok videos, they have really tried to force some stiff-ass people, writers who, like no shade to them at all, are just meant to be behind a laptop and not in front of a camera, but they're like holding cue cards up, and you can just see the writer like struggling to be compelling on video. And
it's a new face for radio, honestly.
Yeah, we're not exempt, right? Yeah. A very important point of this discussion is to also say that, I don't know, first of all, journalism is in a mess. Who cares? But also, like, I can sit here and say all of this, but I have absolutely made a number of TikTok videos for my job, right? Like, I'm not saying this is someone who's above it or whatever. I'm saying this is someone who actually is probably going to edit another TikTok video when I go home. Yeah. Like, it's just a part of where the industry is going, but you have this sort of emerging dichotomy between us and them, and then the sort of blurry Venn diagram middle. And I think that that's more interesting than it is anything else.
Yeah, and it's easy for traditional journalists to be skeptical of these independent creators, but like to me, this is just part of how this industry always evolves because like broadly there was like print and then TV came into the picture and then digital came into the picture, and I joined in digital, and it's like when I joined as like a blogger, I probably represented to some more established journalism like everything that was going wrong with journalism because I was like writing a listicle. And that, so when I see this, I'm like, oh, this is just that for us. Like, we're looking at these people and acting like it's like the most unprecedented thing to have journalism challenged in this way, when in fact, like, I don't know, this has just kind of always been the case. And in fact, I was part of it. And I do think there's, like you said, room for both in that sort of Venn diagram. And the independent and citizen journalism that social media can kind of facilitate is very immediate in the moment, but it can be very surface level, or, it doesn't contain a lot of the research that is necessary and that traditional media can do to sort of take that step back, do really granular reporting, write the full feature that hopefully tells the entire story. And in like an ideal world, someone is consuming both of those things.
Yeah. It's just the way the industry is moving. Yeah. And there is no, I don't know. It's just, there is no against it or for it. Right. It's just kind of like we have to figure out where we are in it and then just deal with that. And so this trial has been such a case study of like, where is media even?
Did you witness or hear about any instances where like independent creators maybe like broke a rule or committed a taboo in the courtroom?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very famously, there was a YouTuber who, I don't know who, it's been, no one knows who.
Oh, okay.
But there was a YouTuber who was kicked out of the courtroom and courthouse even for doxing, for revealing the actual identity, the full government name of a witness who was allowed to testify anonymously per the government. And that's a massive no-no, right? Like that's illegal. It's beyond a no-no. It is illegal. And so, you have people breaking rules like that. Tisa, God love her, she, after Kid Cudi's testimony during one of her live streams, said that she left right after his testimony to try and sort of catch him him. She got to say maybe 5 words to him before a court-martial saw him, was like, absolutely not, shut this down. And so you have new media trying to sort of break the rules to see what story they can get, because there isn't this idea of we have to be rule followers. But then you also have this sort of emerging idea of, or question of, who even is new media? Like, who are they? And do they sort of understand who they are? In one of Stephanie Sue's videos, she said to her audience, you know, why is Myron Gaines of Fresh and Fit there? Yeah. You know, why is he in the courtroom? And yeah, they might have 2 very different demographics that are their audience, but they have the same job, right? She can ask that about him, but he could also ask that about her. They do the exact same thing.
Yeah. After all this, Nadira, are we going to be seeing you take this beat to TikTok anytime soon? Are you going to be live streaming?
I know you asked this as a question and as a joking question, but yes. It's sort of the only way. Follow me on TikTok. Like, it is sort of the only way to really, I don't know, make a name for yourself and have my friends and I jokingly, but not jokingly, talked about coming up with a content house. Yes, I don't know what we would call it, but when we do, I will report here first.
Oh, I think about this all the time.
Yeah, you have to go where the conversation's happening.
Exactly.
Like everything, Google is AI slop now, and Twitter doesn't. No one's there. It's like you got to go where they're talking. And unfortunately, that involves being in front of the camera.
So follow me on TikTok. I'm at You Don't Want My Opinion. There we go.
That's the
shameless plug.
Wow, you've got being a YouTuber journalist down already.
Ew.
Okay. That's the show. We want to thank Nadira Goffe for joining us on today's episode. You can find her coverage of the Diddy trial in the show notes for this episode and on Slate.com. We'll be back in your feed on Saturday, so definitely subscribe. That way, you never miss an episode. Leave us a rating and a review in Apple or Spotify and tell your friends about us. You can follow us on Twitter at ICYMI_pod, and you can always drop us a note at ICYMI@Slate.com.
ICYMI is produced by Vic Whitley-Berry, Candice Lim, and me, Kate Lindsay. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer. Mia Lobel is Slate's executive producer of podcasts, and Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. See you online.
Or on Nadira's upcoming live stream.
If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery. So you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.